Thank you for joining us today at Miniature Wargaming Labs. Today, I finished up painting the Nappoli boys. These are the models that were released by Funky Skulls Games for their Street Wars NYC game. And in this painting tutorial, we'll be discussing how I painted Jaja. To paint this model, I primed him Citadel's Abbadon black. Then I used Citadel's Altdorf Guard blue, Stirland Mud, Nuln Oil, P3's Mennoth white base, Citadel's Mechanicus standard gray, Army Painter's Barbarian flesh, Citadel's Bugmans glow, Army Painter's matte black, Citadel's Reikland flesh shade, Vallejo's glossy black, Citadel's The Fang, and white scar. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. So you can tell I primed my guy black, and that's because I'm going to have dark blue jeans and a black jacket, so to save some time. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with the blue jeans, and I'm going to use some Altdorf Guard blue. So go ahead and get that on there. Now that I have the blue on, I'm going to take some Stirland Mud and I'm going to texture up his base there. And the reason for that is I want it to look like asphalt. So I've got my little spreading tool here. And I'm going to gently push it up against his shoes. Don't want to overwhelm his shoes and look like he's sinking into the asphalt. Trickiest part will be covering up the slotted base. That's why sometimes you have to fill it in with green stuff. Get that smooth finish there. While we wait for the Stirland Mud to dry, what we're going to do is we're going to take some Nuln Oil. And just take my brush and I'm going to apply a wash to his jeans. So the sculptor has done a good job of putting subtle folds there, and to bring them out, I'm going to put a wash. And since I have to wait for the Stirland Mud to dry, might as well have these things dry at the same time. So now our wash is dried and our texturing has dried. So now I'm going to take Mennoth white base. Actually, any khaki color would work, or anything like just a strong base color. Because what we're going to do is we're going to prepare to do the skin. And for that, since we went with black, I need to cover up the black with an intermediate color. This is going to go on any part you see skin or the baseball bat. Don't worry about being sloppy, we're going to have to tidy up. And don't get carried away. You don't want to glop it on, we just want one thin coat. Just enough to put a layer over the black. Now we're going to wait for that Mennoth white to dry, And while it's doing that, I'm going to work on the base. I'm going to take some Mechanicus Standard Gray. And I'm going to take a beat up brush. It doesn't have to be neat. I just want to avoid touching his shoes. But this is going to be the base of the asphalt. I use a sloppy brush because the texture is going to tear up the brush anyway. So we'll go around and get this covered. As we wait for that gray to dry, I'm going to take some Army Painter Barbarian Flesh. And now we're going to start doing the flesh tones here. Just as we put down the Mennoth on there, I'm just going to put one coat. Just in all the parts of exposed skin. Now I'm going to paint that brick, and for that I'm going to use Bugmans Glow. It's brown, but it's got a reddish tint to it. So here I want to be careful not to touch anything else at this point. So as we wait for this stuff to dry up here, I'm going to focus back down on the base. For that, I'm going to take some matte black from Army Painter, and I'm just going to put a little drop in my palette. And then I'm going to take my little mixing tool, and I'm going to put a bunch of water in here. I'm going to mix this up. A little bit more water. What I'm trying to do is make a black glaze. So I don't want to make it as thin as a wash, but thicker than normal paint. I'm going to take that same beat up brush and soaked it in water, and I'm just going to mix this around. Yeah, that's glazy enough. And this is how I'm going to make the asphalt. So what happens is the glaze will stick to everything, but most of it will settle down to the bottom of all the little grooves, and this will give me that variated color that you find in asphalt. Now just pile as much glaze in there. The only thing you got to watch out for is the capillary action pulling it up above his shoes, but that's alright because his shoes are black. It'll all dry out fine. While we're waiting for that black glaze to dry, I am going to put on a wash of Reikland Fleshade. So I'm going to take my brush and just put it on the skin. Talent in a bottle. I'm going to put it on the brick, his hand, and on the baseball bat, and his other hand. I'm now ready to highlight the skin, and for that I'm going to use Army Painter Barbarian Flesh. So I've got some in my little palette here, and I'm just going to get a little bit on my brush and do little highlights on the raised areas. And at this point we want to be extra neat. Depending on the skin tone, you can put up to 2 coats on it. And if I want him a different tone, I might go an even lighter skin tone like Rackworth Flesh or something. Alright, touched up and highlighted the skin. Now I'm going to do the baseball bat, and I'm going to go back to the Mennoth white base. I'm going to get my little brush. I'm going to get most of the paint off, and here just light little coat. Notice he's not swinging an aluminum bat. Now I want to touch up the jacket and the rim of this base, and for that, and his hair too. I use Glossy black from Vallejo. So I just take my detail brush, and this is where we got to be fine. So we're sloppy in other parts, but we got to be neat right here. And so where it comes down to is some of when I was working on the skin that crossed onto the jacket. So now we're just going to tidy that up. So normally it's around the cuffs and the neckline. Now we'll touch up the hair, making sure to steer around his ear. And carefully get those sideburns. There. And now I'm going to have to take him out of my holder. I'm going to work on the base. And that I want a nice smooth glossy finish coat. So I'm going to use Citadel's large dry brush. And I'm going to paint on there nice and thick. And I want one smooth, steady coat. Alright, now we'll let that dry. I'm going to highlight some of the other objects because the jacket's kind of flat right now. So I'm going to take some of Citadel's The Fang, so it's a gray-blue type color. And I'm just going to get a little bit on my brush. I'm just going to wipe most of it off. And this is just peek out the folds, and it also works well on the jeans, just hitting the top parts of that. So he's got some well sculpted creases back here. I might want to do that along his shoes, just so they stand out a little bit more. Alright. Now we'll let that dry. Now we're going to do the tricky part, and that's where we take white scar, pallid witch flesh also works, and we're going to do the little trim on his jacket. So I'm going to get out my extra fine brush. So now when you see this on the model, it's actually very convenient because the sculptor sculpted in the lines that you need to paint. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get some paint on our brush. We're going to twist it along the barrel, and then we're going to just lightly ride the top of that edge. This is the one you want to be patient on. So we just keep going around like that, slow and patient. Alright, so I got the white on, and that's always a fun challenge. Now, some of the artwork shows white on the pocket lining, but that's not actually sculpted in, so I don't feel like trying to take that on. But one thing we are going to do is put on the decal. For that, we're going to need a little bit of water and some Comsol and Comset. We're going to use the Comsol first, and then we'll use the Comset. But first, what I did was I cut out my little tiny transfer sheet. And here's what I do. Get a little bit wet in there. And then I take like a paintbrush or the big back end and I just drop water on it. Cleaned out my paint palette. We're going to let that soak for a little while. And then we're going to take our Comsol. Going to take a junk brush. And we're going to put a little bit on his back. Going to set him down right there. Now what I'm going to do is take a wet brush, and I can see that the decal is ready to come off its backing. So the way I like to do this type of decal, take it out. So I want to grab the paper, the decal a little off. And there, just pull the paper out while the decal's in the place I want. So with a wet brush, we can now take this decal and move it around. And then what we do is start brushing away the excess liquid. You put on a little more console. Microsol. Just thinking of an RF fender. Okay. That'll help it soften up and conform to the surface of the model. Make sure to just pat it into place. Alright, now we're going to let that dry. Now I've used the console to get the decal conformed to the miniature surface and got it fitted there pretty well. But microset is what I'll finish it off with. So at this point, just take my brush and just put a goodly amount of microset on there. This will help it stick and stay and look a little less glossy. Alright, and that's that. So we'll call that a day with our figure there. Tabletop ready to throw down. Alright, well thank you for joining us at Miniature Wargaming Labs. We'll see you next time.